It's showtime.
People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people.
You know, the right to bear arms is because that's the last form of defense against tyranny.
Washington is fundamentally corrupt. There are more words in the IRS code than there are in the Bible.
Made in America, heard around the world. You're listening to Blunt Force Truth. I'm Chuck Woolery, along with my co-host Mark Young. And we have a wonderful guest today. But before we get to him, please, I'm asking everyone on Fox to leave Joe Biden alone. Let him run for president. Shame, everybody's just clunking on Joe Biden. I'm just tired of it. Come on, let the touchy-feely guy run.
I know, but wait a minute. I mean, creepy Uncle Joe has been grabbing people since, the 70s, but
exactly. So why bring it up now?
I know, but wait a minute. When the left had no evidence against Kavanaugh, they tried to destroy the guy.
Yeah, I know.
Now you have Alyssa Milano doing pictures next to him saying, give him a break. Give Biden a break. He's my friend. He just likes sniffing my hair.
Mika Jabrinsky, or whatever her name is, did the same thing on Morning Joe today. It was like the apology tour for, all the Democrats who don't want to get caught up in the web of Me Too. But anyway,
hair sniffer.
I'm not a big Joe Biden fan. I have to. It sounds like I am. I'm really not. But I want him to run because I don't think he has a chance. So let him run. Leave him alone.
Biden would be the best candidate
exactly
for comedy.
Yeah.
Since H. Ross Perot.
I don't know. I loved Ross Perot. He said things that were just
like Ross
awesome.
Perot too. Ross had a couple of things that were my favorites. My favorites were, if you had an epileptic monkey, you wouldn't shake his bag of peanuts.
What the hell does that mean?
I have no idea. And then there was his other one that was, if you feed a horse enough peanut butter, it'll look like he's talking too.
Right. Well, we did.
Those were classics.
I know they were. By the way, the big news today all over, I tortured myself and watched CNN and MSNBC for a little while this morning just to get a whiff in the terms of Joe Biden, a whiff of what was going on. Well, the big news is they haven't moved beyond this torturous investigation, the faux investigation, but they're now talking about all of the clearances, the top secret clearances or clearances that Trump did, like 25 of them that he overruled the intelligence agencies for, and this is just appalling to the left. It's appalling.
Every president's done that.
Well, it's appalling to them, though. This is like their new little toy. And the next thing is they gave Hillary Clinton the top secret clearance, and look what she did. Well, she spread top secrets all over the world through an unsecured
the server in her bathroom.
This will never stop, Mark. You know that. There's going to be one little faux conspiracy after another that leads to another. There'll never be enough redactions. There'll never be enough of anything. It'll just keep going on. And if Trump wins the presidency in 2020, it'll go through 2020. They just hate this guy and they want him out.
Adam Schiff says that Russian collusion is obvious. It's right in front of us. He has the evidence. He wants the report released unredacted.
Well, now here's the deal. Jerry Nadler was part of a group in the Congress.
He's got, by the way, I have to interrupt. Jerry Nadler has the most awesome comb over of anybody in Congress.
Okay.
I just want to give him props for that. That's an awesome comb over. But anyways, go ahead.
Jerry Nadler, when the Clinton thing came out, the Starr report, when it came out, it was given to Congress. And there were so many details in there. They hated it because it had all kinds of little salacious details that nobody should see. So they just said, okay, this is not going to happen anymore. So here's what we're going to do. And they passed a regulation that these things couldn't be given to Congress unredacted, all of the salacious details and everything else. Now it's turned on him, and Nadler is going, I need to take it back, and he can't do it. And it's wonderful to watch this struggle.
Now, Pencil Neck Schiff, by the way, is demanding the unredacted copy of the Mueller report.
Well,
and simultaneously, he is saying that we cannot release an unredacted copy of the FISA warrant.
Yeah, isn't it interesting how all of a sudden Mueller and Barr were like heroes? They were the gold standard. Now all of a sudden they're the enemy because it just doesn't fit their narrative, the Democrats. You know, I've followed Dr. Corsi on Tucker Carlson and watched him, and I know that he's been under a lot of stress lately with this whole thing coming down, and Mueller investigation was after him, and now it's all cleared. So, Dr. Corsi, welcome, and welcome to the show. Tell us exactly what's going on. You must feel incredibly relieved.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm vindicated.
Yes.
This goes back to last August when I first got subpoenaed. Mueller people desperately wanted me to connect Roger Stone to Julian Assange. That was their whole collusion theory.
Right.
The problem is I don't know Assange at all, and I couldn't do it. So I have 40 hours of inquiry with them. You know, we came in voluntarily.
Mm-hmm.
We brought them my laptops and all my, cell phones, and gave them my, email accounts and everything. But they started out right away with the memory traps. You know, they get you day one, you forget some emails. And
Explain to our audience exactly what that is, because it's basically just a perjury trap. So, and they set them for, everybody was accusing, or talking about President Trump not doing an interview with Robert Mueller, but most of the people who have been indicted on crimes that they committed when they talked to Robert Mueller, according to Robert Mueller, because they committed process crimes, and that's what they were trying to get you on. So how does that work exactly?
Well, and by the way, I just wrote this book, Silent No More,
mm-hmm.
and it's about how I became a political prisoner, Mueller's witch hunt. I wrote it as I was going along, and it's doing quite well, but I explain all this day by day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, first day I come in, and they said, "Did you want to send anybody to see Julian Assange?" I said, "No." Then, you're in this closed-in conference room in Washington, D.C., no windows, no clocks, and you've got 3 prosecutors and 6 to 9 FBI on one side of the table, me and my attorney on the other. And they all stand up and leave the room and call my attorney. You cool your heels for about an hour figuring out what they're doing.
Let me interrupt you just a moment and ask you a question. How much is that attorney an hour that you had to take with you?
Oh, I spent $200,000 in attorneys.
Yeah.
Easy.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get it all back. Our side, people don't contribute to the GoFundMe. If you're a leftist, you get $500,000. So the first day they ask you, we're talking about Mueller and how they do this perjury trap. First day they asked, did I want to send anybody to see Assange? And I said, no. Well, they all stomp out of the room, 3 prosecutors, 6 to 9 FBI. They call my attorney into the next room, and I'm in this room with no clock, no windows. You can't leave for about an hour, wondering what they're doing. They come back and they say, they have this email that Roger Stone sent me in July 2016, saying somebody needs to go to see Assange, and I sent that to Ted Malloch in London. Of course, Ted Malloch.
Who is Ted Malloch?
He's a good friend. He's an academic in Malloch. He's an American who works he was then working at Oxford.
Okay.
Malloch never went to see Assange. I forgot about that email. And so they allowed me to go home and review my emails, and came back 10 days later and amended that testimony. I said I was wrong. I saw this, and I was willing for Malloch to go to see Assange. I would have been willing myself to go to see Assange. There were emails from Joseph Farrell, who was my boss at WorldNet Daily. Joseph said, we under the Pentagon Papers case, we can all go see Assange. Why don't you go do it? I said to Joseph, send me an airplane ticket and I'll go to London and do it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he never sent the ticket. I never saw Assange. So that's the memory trap. The first day like that, they've got you. They say they can send you to prison.
Right.
Well, after 40 hours of it, and my mind was mush. I mean, they were angry because I could not connect Roger Stone to Assange. I don't know Assange. And they were sure I did, because in July and August 2016, my wife and I took our 25th wedding anniversary. We were in Italy. And I figured out that Assange had Podesta's emails. He was going to drop them in October. And I told Roger that. I told a lot of people that. Mm-hmm. So the FBI was convinced they had all my emails, all my phone calls. They were convinced that I had to have met with Assange.
So they're implicating you by association.
Yeah. And, when they blew this all up, and they said they were going to indict me, or I could plead guilty to this one count and not go to prison. The one count was my first day's memory mistake, unamended, not acknowledging they'd allowed me to amend that testimony. Well, I mean, this is, they say, if you don't do this, we're going to indict you on a bunch of charges in Washington, D.C., and you'll get a jury that hates you.
So they're just looking for a notch on their gun, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, I got another indictment.
Yeah, and so I told them to take a hike. I mean,
good for you.
You go through all kinds of pressure. My wife.
How did you feel about that when you said? Because I mean, good night. When you say go take a hike to a federal prosecutor and a special counsel, you got to be, kind of holding your crotch a little bit, going, man, I hope this works.
Well, my wife woke up and she said one day, I'd rather visit you in prison the rest of your life than have you not be the man I married.
Very good. Well, boy, can't beat that, can you?
Yeah, so I decided I don't care what it costs us. I'm not going before a federal judge pleading guilty to a crime I didn't commit. So I told Mueller to take a hike. And
now, General Flynn didn't have that luxury. He didn't do that because they were coming after his family. They were coming after his kids. They were, he'd pretty much gone through all of his money by that point, and he just went. I guess he just kind of rolled over. I don't know. He felt like he had to. Is that your impression with that, or are you more familiar with that than I am?
No, I think that's pretty much what's been reported. I mean, they came after my stepson too. I mean, they were before I had the subpoena. I had an old computer and I gave it to my stepson. He's 40 years old. Told him to, wipe the hard drive and let my wife use it in her business, which he did.
Right.
And so the FBI sees text messages between my stepson and me where he says, I've wiped the hard drive. So they think he's destroying evidence.
Well, they didn't. They weren't worried about Hillary Clinton wiping her hard drive and beating the crap out of it with a hammer.
Yeah, and I had a complete backup to that computer.
Yeah.
Nothing was. I said, why don't we'll give you the complete backup? They didn't want it.
It's funny when people are investigating you on that level. Everything is suspicious, no matter what you do. You can do the right thing, and it's suspicious.
Well, they investigated. So I went to see everybody I was in communication with in 2016. They sent FBI agents to visit them. All over the world. I mean, they were really inquiring about every email I'd written, everything I'd done. I had all these phone calls and everything. Even though we gave them everything, I'm sure they had it. At any rate, I told them, I'm 72 years old. You want to put me in prison? Go ahead and do it. That's where America. If that's where justice has come to in America, because I knew I had done nothing wrong. The crime is that you knowingly and willfully give them information that you know to be false on a material subject with the intent to deceive them. Well, I didn't do that. Right. I had memory mistakes. They ask you a question. I have an 8-inch thick book with my name on it. They pull out tab 32 and they said, well, here's an email you wrote 2 years ago that disagrees with what you just said. And I said, well, why didn't you ask me that? Show me that email first. They ask you questions in rapid fire fashion. They all stand up, get out of the room. They call my attorney. They say I'm lying. I mean, this is a nightmare. It's why
let me ask you another thing. How good was it to have an attorney there, and how much did they contribute? Now, I don't want you to badmouth your attorney. It's not what I'm looking for, but how comforting was it, or was it at all, having an attorney there?
Well, my attorney was.
I mean, did they
good.
stand in the gap?
Yeah, he's been my longtime attorney. He's David Gray. He is a local attorney. He graduate of Rutgers. He could easily have been in a big firm, but he's wanted to raise a family, and he's a brilliant attorney. And what he was able to do is all these times when they act up and go out of the room and call him over, and he was able to walk them off the ledge and talk with them and negotiate with them. He could play their little charade, and he was very good at playing their little charade.
So he wasn't even in the room with you.
No, he was in the room.
Oh, he was.
What they would do, you're facing this little conference room. They pick you up at your hotel. They bring you this unmarked FBI building in Washington. You drive in through the garage. They go into a safe room. They take away your phones, your laptops, all electronics. They bring
Your
you up
necktie,
to
just in case you want to hang yourself.
yeah, right. Including my sunglasses. I couldn't have them with me. Couldn't have my shades either.
Right.
So, they put you in this little room with a conference table, and you're facing three of the prosecutors. These were some of the best of the prosecutors.
Mm-hmm.
You're facing 6 to 9 FBI. It's me and my attorney for hours after hours after
Was
hours.
Weissman part of that interview?
No, and neither was Mueller. The top one was Jeannie Rhee. She was very senior, and she was Jeannie Rhee was the Hillary Clinton lawyer for her foundation. All these people were totally Democratic partisans.
I mean, did you meet with Mueller or Weissman at any point in this mess?
Not at all. They never showed up. But in this whole mess, I mean, they're constantly grilling you, and constantly forgetting. And, and David Gray is over there negotiating with them. They leave me alone. They all stand up. They pull all their things out of the table. They act like, they're angry. And then they call David in the next room. They leave me alone in this conference room, no cell phone, no computer, maybe an hour or more at a time. And when do you think they're going to come in and arrest me, This whole thing was I went in to cooperate with these guys, and they used techniques. They thought they could break me, and I would finally tell them who my connection was to Assange. And it's ridiculous because I didn't.
Have you ever experienced anything like this before?
No. This is like the KGB. This is like the Gestapo. These guys are thugs, and they question you in a
like you're a thug,
like a criminal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it sounds like you had everything but the bright light and the rubber hose pulled out on you.
Yeah, I mean, if it had been the Middle Ages, they'd have had a rack in the room to stretch you on. I mean, this is not the way we should have justice in America. This is thug justice.
Now, you filed a countersuit, right?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I wouldn't take their plea, but I did that the Monday after November. I went on TV and said, I'm not doing it.
And they wanted you to lie.
They wanted me to lie. And also, I have all kinds of securities licenses and insurance licenses. They said, well, you're going to go before a judge. You're going to plead that you're a criminal, and you're not going to be able to
work anymore.
Sealed. It's going to be sealed. So you can't tell the regulators that insurance and securities. I have an affirmative responsibility if there's a change in my status to notify the regulators, the insurance and securities industry. So I had to lie. I had to confess before a judge and God to a crime I did not commit.
And what was it they wanted you to testify to?
The one-day memory mistake on the first day that they'd allowed me to amend it without acknowledging they'd allowed me to amend it.
Yeah, he covered this earlier, Mark,
right.
When you were off the air. He it was an email indirectly. It was indirectly sent through to Assange and another man in England who was a professor, and they
sent to Assange. It was sent only to Ted Malloch, who's a good friend and a professor. Said Ted, basically go see Assange.
So he did he go see Assange with that?
No, he did not.
He didn't. So the connection was never made.
Never.
Oh, I was under the impression it was made through Ted Malloch, but it wasn't even made that way.
There was no connection made.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in Italy in July and August, I figured it out on my own. I connected the dots. Nobody told me that Assange had Podesta's emails. I figured it out.
That was something that you figured out on your own, and they figured that you must have known somebody or known something or you must have had some kind of connections. You couldn't possibly be that good of a sleuth.
Yeah, I couldn't be that smart.
Right. Yeah.
And, I knew precisely what these emails were going to contain. I knew when they were going to be dropped, and it turned out to be exactly right.
So let me ask you a question, and I'm sure you don't know the answer to this, but you're out of jeopardy now, but maybe you do. Who hacked John Podesta's emails? Does anybody know?
Well, I think John Podesta's emails were hacked multiple times, but the DNC server, see, there's two separate hacks here. John Podesta had his password with passwords.
I know.
It's like a joke, yeah. Any 16-year-old or 14-year-old could have hacked in there.
And he kept it on his secretary's desk.
Right. It was kept on a secretary's desk.
Yeah. So anybody who walked by could figure out how to get.
Right. So the freaking janitor could find it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that multiple people did.
But they said that Russia hacked or WikiLeaks hacked and everything else, and nobody really knows. They've never been definitive. There've just been accusations thrown out there. No one really knows who did hack John Podesta's email multiple times or one time. They don't know, do they?
Well, all the prosecutors, when I was being interrogated, they said, Dr. Corsi, we're not interested in your theories who stole the DNC emails. I mean, they had this intelligence estimate, which I think was completely fraudulent, that said it was the Russians. Julian Assange said the Russians didn't have anything to do with it. I asked Jeannie Rhee and other prosecutors, Zelensky, another prosecutor was there, and so why don't you guys give Assange immunity? Bring him in here and ask him what's his proof that Russia had anything to do with it. Well, Dr. Corsi, we're not interested in your theories about that. All we want to know is, how did you connect Roger Stone to Assange?
Right.
What about Seth Rich with the emails?
Well, I asked him about that. He said Julian Assange said Seth Rich was involved. He certainly hinted at it. He said, Dr. Corsi, we're not interested in that. You're not here to inform us who you think stole the emails. We know Russia stole them.
Well, how did they know it? They couldn't even investigate. They never had, FBI never got into the DNC server. They wouldn't allow it.
Look, this whole experience really tarnished my whole estimate of the FBI.
God,
FBI
you know what?
supposed to be these geniuses, did profiling. They thought I'm a 72-year-old guy. I'm so scared of going to prison that I'll confess to a crime I didn't commit. They didn't know I was going to tell them to take a hike. I mean, you should have been able to figure that out from my career. I've been telling a lot of people to take a hike for the last 15 years.
Do you think they're coming after you for anything else in the future?
No, case is closed.
It's over. Yeah. Well, the other thing is,
I didn't know that until March 17th. You see, we had to live from Thanksgiving until March 17th, not knowing if they were going to break the door down and come and arrest me.
But that's the Fed way, though. When the Fed never tells you that we're not still looking at you, they let you sit and live with it.
Yeah, this is not justice in America. This is justice in Nazi Germany. I mean, these guys, they lie to you. I said, like David Gray said, just tell us who you think the connection was. If you think there is one, tell us. They didn't have anybody. They'd searched too. The truth was there wasn't anybody.
I feel like this whole interrogation of you and others was like a desperation move. They needed to prove something. They needed to pin it on somebody other than Hillary, the DOJ, the FBI, and the DNC. I mean, they just had to find somebody else, and you were like a part of that whole fantasy, and so many others were as well. It's sickening when you really think about it. It's not only frightening, but it's absolutely sickening that we live with this kind of injustice in our justice system. I mean, the thing that we depend on most, and the DOJ and the FBI are those two, so closely related. We depend on them. We trust them. And boy, they have broken that trust. Now, I'm not going to say that every, lying FBI guy did that or woman, but the upper echelon certainly needs to be held responsible so that people feel a little more comfortable and know that, I don't know, maybe this will go on. Maybe Republicans do it. I'm a history buff, and I've listened to all the things that the Democrats have done over the last 100 years, turning the IRS and the FBI on their enemies, and it's just disgusting. I mean, when a guy like FDR completely ruins a man like Mellon, who was a fabulous Treasury Secretary, a wonderful guy, great banker, and he just was out to destroy him for no apparent reason. And they did everything they could. And it goes on with Johnson, there wasn't anything I can remember on Carter. JFK did it. I mean, of course you can't investigate Camelot because that's, sacred to the Democrats, but it's like they all have these little things where they use the IRS. It's the first time it's not the first time the FBI has been used, but boy, to this extent, it is just disgusting what has happened here and how everything else, now, John, not according to me, but everything else has been overlooked. There is so much nastiness that went on, and it's just absolutely excused and overlooked at this point. Now, maybe something will happen in the future. People keep promising me that it will, but I at this point, because of what happened to you and what happened to others, don't have any confidence that it will happen.
Dr. Corsi, do you think Mueller or not Mueller? Do you think AG Barr will go after the bad actors?
Well, I mean, the whole point of the silent no more is that this was political justice.
Mm-hmm.
This is not not one side. This is not equal justice. It's political. The FBI, and by the way, I take exception. Even the rank and file, they did the bidding. They went out and did all this political, one-sided looking at things. They weren't fair. They weren't after the truth. They were after they were after impeaching Donald Trump. That was the whole goal of this thing.
That's
right.
It
was apparent.
And it still is.
It still is. Now, do I think Barr is going to do anything? Well, I think Barr did call in Mueller and say, what you got, Bob? And Bob had nothing. He said, well, Bob, you've had 2 years, you're done. And Weissman, I think, left angry because Barr told him, you're not going to go after Trump's family unless you got probable cause. And by the way, he said to Weissman, I'm pretty confident that if you can think you got a continuing career here with the Justice Department, you're going to be facing an ethics charge.
With Weissman?
Yeah, with Weissman.
I mean, God, Weissman's been overturned by everybody. I mean, I don't even know why he's an attorney, and he's going to go out and teach other attorneys.
Yeah, well, Weissman's left. I think he chose to retire rather than face all the ethics charges and everything else Barr was going to put him through. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I have sued them. I've sued them. I filed a criminal complaint with Barr's office against Mueller, and I filed a $350 million lawsuit in federal district court in D.C. alleging prosecutorial misconduct.
Now, is anyone investigating your criminal complaint?
Well, I don't know, but we're going to find out pretty quickly here, giving Barr some time to settle in. But I'm going to make a big issue out of it if they don't. And I intend for this case to get heard. I mean, look, they were pressing me to go to prison. The only way I could go to prison is if they scared me enough so that I didn't want to get indicted in Washington and I pled to a crime I didn't commit. But they weren't ever going to indict me in Washington because they knew they couldn't prove the case. The whole thing was a bluff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is not the way America is supposed to operate. This is not who we are.
Well, that's why I told them, they could take this and, take a hike. I wasn't about, especially with my support of my wife, which I was critical. I mean, this is a decision you basically have to make together.
Right.
And by the way, I'm going to have to cut this off in a couple of minutes because I'm on a little bit. I had scheduled a half an hour for this morning.
Well, I do appreciate you being a badass. Tell us about the book. So you have a new book out. No, he is. He's an actual badass.
Wait a minute, guys. I mean, what are you talking about?
That takes a lot of stones, not to confuse with Roger, but it takes some stones to be able to go in there and tell the FBI to pound sand. So you have a new book out.
I have a new book. The book is Silent No More. What it's about it's about the experience I went through here, and it's day by day. I mean, I think you read it's written in the first person. I wrote it while I was going through this nightmare, and you can see how the strategies, how it felt. This is not justice in America. The book I think is actually kind of frightening. It's one of the most important books I've ever written, and it exposes Mueller. They hate this book, Mueller, because I was supposed to not talk about any of this. I said, I'm not going to take your plea deal. In fact, I'm going to write a book about it, and I'm going to go on all the media. So
the first time I saw you on television, I thought, man, I hope this guy didn't get nailed to the wall here. I really do, because he's really going out on a limb. And you did, with the saw.
Yeah, I did, with the saw. But you know what? I knew which part of the limb they were on, and that's where I saw it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, I knew I had done nothing wrong. I knew what they were doing to me was thug tactics, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it.
Good for you.
And, and in the end, I'm vindicated. And
Yes.
that book, I think, is critical because that book's got to be read all over America for us to put an end to this. And I think it's time to put an end to this. I hope that Barr has the courage to do it because the Americans now, I think, are losing faith in our justice system. Political justice is not justice.
Oh, absolutely. Folks, I want to remind everybody, you can go to Amazon. The book is Silent No More, How I Became a Prisoner of the Mueller Witch Hunt by Dr. Jerome Corsi. I want to encourage everybody to get a copy of that book. And Dr. Corsi,
it's very funny.
This microphone's open to you when you want to come back.
I've absolutely got to go right now.
Okay, we'll let you go.
We'll catch you later. Thank you very
much. Thank you, Dr. Corsi. Thank you so much. Bless you.
So, Chuck, there it is. Dr. Corsi, a 72-year-old badass.
Yeah, more than me, I'll tell you. I'm 78.
Stood up to Mueller, stood up to the FBI, to the DOJ, and he has succeeded. Now, I don't know. I think the fact that he's filed a criminal complaint and filed a civil case, I'm doubtful. I hope that those cases go somewhere. I'm doubtful those cases will go anyplace.
Nobody is ever held accountable in Washington. Nobody in authority. Nobody even out of authority if they're connected to the Democrats.
Well, there's a lot of governmental immunity that these guys have from people coming after them, especially in the civil area.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, he has a $350 million civil case, but I don't know. I'm doubting that case goes anyplace.
What is amazing to me about this whole thing, and I know this is probably something that's been said before, but I'm going to say it again, and that is this whole thing was about Russia interfering with our election. And so the DOJ, the FBI, our intelligence people, the NSA, whoever else is involved in it, Clapper, Brennan, you name it, they all use Soviet-style tactics to try to get rid of Donald Trump and everybody in his orbit. I mean, think about it. How ironic that is that this was all about Russia interfering and they're using Soviet-style tactics in order to try to prosecute people. And thank God it didn't work.
Chuck, is this not the Democratic Party today, though, that whatever they accuse you of is what they're doing?
The Democrat Party, yes, it's called projection. And the Democrat Party is a very interesting mix. It's a mix of Marxists and fascists. So the only difference between a Marxist and fascist, they're both socialists. Marxist is worldwide. Fascist is just a national movement. But it's just fascinating to me how you could incorporate both of these nasty ideologies under the heading of the Democrat Party and socialist Democrats and move forward in America, which is it's such an antithesis or anthological setup. It's like Islam versus the Constitution. It just doesn't work at all. And yet there's so many Americans out there who agree with it, don't see any problem with it, will, as the Democrats project onto Republicans or anybody who will listen to them. And by the way, it's not just this thing. They project everything. If it's equal rights for women, equal pay for women, it's all projected on, they pick up these little things and make your life seem like it's miserable when it's not. And that's really the world we live in. We live in a political world where there is a party out there that wants you to be upset and miserable all the time. So anytime good things happen, if the economy's good, they'll swear it's bad. And there's so many problems with it. And there are 5 people over here that aren't being taken care of. It's just amazing to me how people will allow that to invade their lives and become a part of it. And then run their lives on top of that. They fall into the whole lockstep of it.
Well, you've got Bernie Sanders that is out there saying that, the economy is a disaster and people are starving.
It's ridiculous.
Kamala Harris put a tweet out saying that when she's elected president, that she's going to get rid of the $2,300 pay discrepancy between black teachers and white teachers. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I called her out on this, which did get her to change her position. And that shows you how these people can't This is what amazes me, Chuck. They can't think past the moment. They don't understand laws of unintended consequences. If I say this, what cascade of events might it cause? Right. So as an example, she's attacking the school saying they pay black teachers $2,300 less. Mm-hmm. I came out and thanked her for finally coming out and showing that the National Association of Teachers, the teachers union, is a racist organization because they negotiate the contracts for the teachers, right?
Thank you. It's your union.
So if your union is negotiating a contract and your union says that it is okay to pay black teachers $2,300 less, then the union that is supporting you is a racist organization.
Yeah, right.
And of course, what was her answer to that? Russia!
Yeah, of course. Russia is everything. Russia's the answer to everything, although it's not. I mean, it's amazing what's going on today.
Adam Schiff says that we have collusion happening in plain sight.
It's happening right now. While you and I are talking, they're colluding with someone.
I am actually colluding with the Russians as we speak right now.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Well, because I brought a salad in between the shows, and I brought Russian dressing.
You know, the thing is, we're joking about that. These people are in power. These people control the House side of the Congress, and they can do nasty, and they will do nasty things. So expect it. Look forward to it. And CNN and MSNBC and ABC and CBS and the New York Times and the Washington Post will back them up no matter what they say.
So they've now changed the narrative. So A.G. Barr said that Mueller's report didn't just say there was no crime. Mm-hmm. Mueller's report said there was no evidence.
Hey, let me tell you something. This should be shortcutted just this way. If they couldn't accuse anybody of a crime, if Mueller couldn't accuse anybody of a crime, if they couldn't indict anybody, if they couldn't do anything that had anything to do with Russia, shut up.
But here's how they're changing it, though. They're changing it to Mueller couldn't find enough evidence to reach the high standard or the high bar of the crime of collusion. Yeah. First off, there is no crime called collusion.
No, it has to be conspiracy. It's not collusion.
Right. So he couldn't reach the high bar of a non-existent charge. Right. But that's not what it said. It said there was no evidence in spite of Russians attempting to lure the campaign in.
Exactly.
And they're turning it to, well, he didn't say there was no proof. He just didn't have enough to convict.
You know, that's why I say this will never stop. They'll just keep churning this up and keep turning this over. And every time you plant a crop, they'll turn it over and destroy it. And it's in order to get their way, they will do anything they possibly can. And they've got the media to back them up all the way. And so many people, as usual, be totally misinformed and believe they are well informed. And they'll think you and I are stupid and ignorant because they know this happened, even though it didn't. And it never did.
And it's amazing because what I will say to people is, look, all this information is coming from the media that for 22 months has promised you Russian collusion. They've promised you Don Jr. in handcuffs, Ivanka in handcuffs. The president would be impeached. The entire family is going to be in prison. They've been promising you this for 22 months and they didn't come across. Why are you still listening to them?
Well, let me ask you, let me just put this in perspective for you, really. If that's what they promised for 22 months and they believe this is going to happen, then why do they need a candidate that will beat Trump? He shouldn't be running in 2020, should he? According to their prediction.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, they should be able to elect a ham sandwich at that point.
Thank you very much.
He's going to be in handcuffs.
That's right.
But these people, I don't get, I mean, the recent poll, a brand new poll out shows that 40% of America does not think the Mueller report cleared the president. How is that even possible?
Because of the mainstream media. That's how it's possible. It's the only way that it's possible.
Correct.
By misinforming. That's all.
It's because people propaganda. Are overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed by information bias, availability bias. There's so much of this out there that people buy into this whole notion of where there's smoke, there's fire.
Hey, let me tell you something. Let's go back just for instance, because Mark Levin pointed, he's got this new book he's got out. He went back and went through this whole history, which is really important. And I'm going to use FDR again as an example with Coolidge's Secretary of the Treasury, which was Mellon, who, Mellon from Mellon Banks. He was a very wealthy guy. By the way, he was a immigrant that came over and built an empire on his own, self-made man, everything else. But FDR hated him. And nobody knew why he hated him. He never said, I hate him for this reason or that, but he turned everything he could loose on, I think it was Andrew Mellon is his name, and tried to destroy his life. So here's the point that I'm going to make. Did newspapers cover this? No. They never said a word about it. Newspapers never covered the bad things that Democrats do, like Johnson. I mean, Johnson was nasty. He was a nasty human being. He was coarse. He was crude. He was vulgar. And they keep talking about Trump, all this kind of stuff. Johnson was as vulgar and nasty as you could possibly be. But did the newspapers ever report on that? No, they loved him, so they didn't. They liked Jack Kennedy, so they didn't. And you can't besmirch the name of Jack Kennedy, although he used the FBI against everybody, Martin Luther King, and you name it. He turned the FBI loose. And he shared all of his information with a guy named Bradley. What was his first name? Who was with the Washington Post at the time. He was with Newsweek. Ben Bradley. Oh yeah, that guy. Watergate. JFK shared all that FBI information with him. But did the newspapers report that? No. So here, my point is, this can go on for a long time, and the newspapers, the media in general, will constantly pound you with false information, misleading information, bias information for the Democrat Party. They are the wing of the Democrat Party. I mean, all you got to say is, here's one thing I noticed, and swear this happened. You know it happened because you saw it. Nancy Pelosi came out and said, we need to move on from the Mueller investigation. So what does she want to move on with? We need to talk about health care. So the next 5 hours, the airwaves on it was filled with healthcare. They all just followed suit. So, yeah, okay, let's all talk about healthcare now. So it's just whatever they command, the mainstream media follows, and that's the information you get. So you can't really blame people for being so biased because they're so damn ignorant, and you can't blame them for it because they're getting bad information, but they swear it's real.
I get frustrated because
I know
it's epistemology. How do you know what you know? Yeah. Stop taking information from people and ask yourself the question, how do I know this? Right. I'll give you an example. You're talking about FDR. So AOC, in an interview with Chris Hayes.
Oh, it's unbelievable. I know where you're going with this.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So in an interview with Chris Hayes, she said that we implemented the 22nd Amendment in order to get FDR out of office.
So this is how many years a president can serve consecutively, and it's 8 now. And
term limits.
Yeah, and there weren't term limits at that point, and Congress passed them, and the Democrats passed them.
But the point
it was before he died or after he died.
That's exactly. So the point is, she said that we implemented it to get him out of office.
Yeah, well,
he died in his third term.
I know.
And that didn't become a law till 2 years after the man was dead.
But this is the kind of thing that, go ahead.
I got to finish. She then went on Twitter and started schooling Representative Cheney, and started schooling Representative Cheney, telling her she should learn the 22nd Amendment.
Oh, Mark, how many tweets do I have that come across my board that I don't argue with them because I realize they're just totally ignorant. They think they're accusing me of the same thing. And I look at them and I think, you don't know what you're talking about. So why should I listen to you? And you have 9 followers. Goodbye. I block them.
Okay, but we're talking about somebody with millions of followers.
I know. I know. And that's the problem. That's where these people who come up against you and me and on Twitter and everything else, Facebook or whatever it is, that's where they get their information. It's false information. It's not just biased, it's totally false.
But she accused Cheney of getting her constitutional law information from Facebook.
Yeah,
and told her she needs to go read the 22nd Amendment from someone who just said, I don't know what the 22nd Amendment is. Mm-hmm. And you have this doorknob, Chris Hayes, who just sits there nodding. Yes, that's true. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, that's his job. That's his job.
So obviously he doesn't know anything. No. Now remember, last month, Chris Hayes is the guy who went out and tweeted non-existent history also.
I don't know. What are you talking about?
Oh, what was one that Chris Hayes did? He went out and put a tweet out. I know. He's the one that tweeted about Nixon being impeached.
What did he say?
He said this. He did a tweet saying that what Donald Trump is doing is the very same thing that got Nixon impeached. No, Nixon was never impeached.
Yeah, right. That's right. He resigned.
So you have these people that have these big microphones, like an MSNBC or a CNN, which, by the way, is becoming a smaller microphone as we speak.
Dear God, I watched them for an hour this morning just to kind of get a perspective on where they were going. It was painful.
I got to tell you, though, I mean, you've looked at the ratings of CNN?
No.
I had more people standing behind me in line getting lunch yesterday than CNN had watching them at the same time yesterday.
Well, I don't know where people are going, because they're going somewhere to get their news and information if they're not going to CNN. Maybe they're going over to MSNBC,
social media,
which is worse. So if they go to social media, fine. I mean, but you're going to latch on to the same people that believe the same stuff you believe for some, unknown reason, because the mainstream media has led you that way. So it's really hard to detach yourself from that confirmation bias. It's very, very difficult to do that. But to open up to reason and try to understand and look, and I mean, look, I make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, but this is like huge. You can't live like this. I was watching Bill Maher the other day, and here was this guy who was a big liberal.
My God. You were watching Bill Maher?
You know what? I have to watch these people to see exactly what they're talking about, how they're couching it, because they're very famous and people attach, great credibility to their celebrity. And so I watched them and I listened, and I was watching this guy. I wish I could remember his name, because he's a big, big lefty who, talks all the time. And he said, I just don't understand. People are so miserable because they're into politics, and politics is so miserable and so one-sided. And he's basically talking about Donald Trump and the Republican Party. And I'm thinking to myself, how can you get that so screwed up? But they do.
Amazing.
They just don't see the log in their own eye. They just cannot see it. They refuse to do it.
Well, Bill Maher says that socialism makes you the freest.
Oh, Bill Maher is the most arrogant, condescending, supercilious human being I've ever known, who knows nothing but thinks he can because he does it in a funny way. And he is funny. There's no question about it. He's very funny sometimes. Mm-hmm. But I've done his show. You know that.
Yeah.
I've done his show. Okay. When you go to a game show, now this isn't recent, but back when I was doing Wheel of Fortune, we had this, but all shows, sitcoms, no matter what, if you have not been an audience, you don't know what's going on. So I'm going to tell you what's going on in Bill Maher's audience. There are signs about 3 feet by 1.5 feet. So 3 feet wide, 1.5 feet tall. And there are usually 3 or 4 of them that face the audience. So when he says something, there is a guy who is a floor guy who stands and does this, and he leads the audience. He's like the leader. And when he starts clapping, the applause signs go on, and everybody, starts applauding and everything else. Not necessarily because they even understand what Bill Maher said, but because they're led to do it like sheep. Now it's time for you to applaud to become part of the show. And it is part of the show. It's just it's what goes on. So, and the only thing they don't have is a boo sign.
So they have basically a group of fluffers out in the audience.
Exactly. That's exactly what they are. They're audience fluffers. Okay, applaud now. Let's go, everybody. Yeah, jump on. You're part of the show. Yeah, right.
Oh, speaking of fluffers.
Jeez, why did you have to bring that up? God.
Imagine how bad your life is when the third worst decision you've made in your life was doing porn.
What are you talking about?
Stormy Daniels.
What? I don't get it. I'm sorry. You lost me. The third worst decision. What's the first and second?
I would say the first one was hiring Michael Avenatti.
Okay. Yeah, right.
The second one was deciding to sue the president and losing and owing him $300,000.
You know, here's a that's
and
a
then
great,
you made porn movies.
there's a great point there, and that is that, you know, CNN had Michael Avenatti on every 5 minutes, and in fact they talked about he was going to run for president, he's going to do all this kind of stuff. He was their great hope. Well, look at him now. I mean, folks, can't you get a hold of yourself out there who are on the left watching this crap and say, okay, I can't believe these people. But I'm just saying.
Well, who else did CNN have on who was one of their great commentators? Mark Garagos.
Yeah, right. He's on all the time too.
Okay, he was on all the time. Now he's part of Avenatti's scam routine. This guy is, let me couch this properly. It is alleged that he has scammed people. And and I said this last week, and I have our actual attorney is sitting in the room with me right now. Mel is here. You don't know that, but now that our show has gotten so dangerous that we actually have to have an attorney.
Bring our own attorney.
So he just waves at me every time I say something that's going to get us sued. But and he looks like this right now. All you do is see him waving.
Of course, I have no attorney. I'm just on my own here. I'm going to die.
So right now, as I said last week, violating his attorney trust account is going to give him enemies, whether it's Democrats or lawyers. No lawyer is going to want to back a guy who stole money out of his client trust account, because that just besmirks the entire profession. So he's done. He is done. He's going to be disbarred. He's never going to practice law again.
Well, the main thing is he's going to be ignored.
He's going to probably do some time.
That's untenable. It's like Jesse Smollett. Everybody said, why did Jesse Smollett do what he did? Well, he did it because he wanted to be known. He wanted to be a victim, and he wanted to be a hero at the same time. And that's why he did what he did. There was no, mystery about this at all. And now that it's out, I love Jesse Jackson came out with his stern face saying, Jesse Smollett should have never been convicted.
That seemed like a safe bet.
He worked for me. He worked for Jesse Jackson licking envelopes, Our
standby attorney Mel just reminded me that violating your client trust account is the most egregious thing that a lawyer can do.
Mm-hmm. Well,
he's done.
We'll see if CNN will even allow that to be announced and explain what happened. I doubt very seriously if they will. Have you got your throat is like mine? Everything in Texas is exploding right now.
Well, you're having cedar fever now, right?
No, that happens in January, February, and March. Then
so cedar fever's over?
Yeah, then comes other things. However, I will say this. Central Texas today, I'll say this in closing, Central Texas today, where I live, is covered, is a carpet of bluebells and Indian paintbrushes. I mean, the flowers are extraordinary. Go ahead. Go ahead and plug Blunt Force Truth. Go ahead and do it.
I was just showing my wonderful Blunt Force Truth coffee mug here, Chuck.
That's right. It's plug the mug time.
You can find the fabulous mugs, hats, and T-shirts. We have to send Jerome Corsi one of our T-shirts. If anyone deserves to wear that T-shirt,
no kidding,
he is the guy. Because our T-shirts say, "I love my country, but I fear my government." So Corsi certainly, I've got one here. Patrick just handed me one here. Corsi certainly has the right to wear this shirt.
Absolutely, he does.
So we're going to have to send him one.
Yeah, you have to send me a XXX. I keep gaining weight.
No, you got to stop. Sell that barbecue. You got to stop. You have to stop going to your wife's restaurant every day.
Exactly. Yeah.
If I was you and my wife owned that restaurant, I would weigh 660 pounds right now.
It's very difficult.
from eating that stuff.
Very difficult.
Because Opie's barbecue, I swear, she's like she's putting crack in it or something, because you just become addicted to it. You can't stop eating it.
I know.
And every time I go there, I will be sick.
Well, that's not very nice.
No, I mean, I'll overeat. I just eat too much because you can't stop eating the stuff. I got a question for you before we wrap up. We're Schiff and all of these low-life scumbags
right.
that are demanding that the unredacted report be released.
Right.
Now, we have Schiff that is claiming that we cannot have an unredacted FISA warrant released.
Well, they don't want that released because it'd be extraordinarily damaging, and they know it.
Okay, but this is what I want people to look at. Look at this hypocrisy. This needs to be unredacted. That's the only way the American people know the truth. This cannot be released unredacted because the American people can't know the truth.
Well, it's the way of the Democrat world, isn't it? It's just totally upside down.
Now, let's cap that whole thing with, where are these people demanding the release of the sealed documents on Jussie Smollett? This guy, think about this.
By the way, let me put something in perspective. What is the woman's name who's the attorney general or whatever her position that excused him, exonerated him, a judge? Is it Kirkland?
Fox.
Is it Fox?
Yeah.
Okay. Understand this, folks. Fox was backed by George Soros. And it's very important to understand this, because these people, these district attorneys all over the United States who are left progressive district attorneys, are being backed by Soros. He is trying his best to fill our government with as many left-leaning judiciary people as he possibly can, and he's backing them with millions of dollars every place. Nobody can compete with his money. That's why these people are winning, and that's why you're getting this kind of result with Smollett and other people.
Well, look at this guy, Chuck. He hit every cliche he could hit.
Oh,
gay. He's gay. He's black. Lynching, a rope, white attackers.
And then Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton come out and support him, and you go, what are they thinking? I mean, even the national, what was it, the awards that he was up for?
Oh, NAACP, yes.
Yeah, the NAACP award. I mean, they even made fun of him.
Well, Chris Rock did.
Yeah, Chris Rock did. He had guts enough to do it. Thank God for Chris Rock.
And they went after Chris Rock for doing it.
Of course they will. I mean, what else,
I mean, Chris Rock made the comment, what was he thinking?
Exactly. Really? Yeah. What was he thinking?
Is there anyone on the planet that actually thinks this guy is innocent?
Well, I loved it when his attorney came out and said, well, maybe these guys were in whiteface.
I don't. And I was offended by that.
Well,
because that's a misappropriation of my race.
I wasn't offended by it because they also had ski masks on over the whiteface. So why would they bother putting whiteface on it? They're going to cover their whole face with a ski mask.
Well, you might have been able to see around their eyes. Maybe they had white hands instead of white face.
I mean, it's so silly and so ridiculous that I can't imagine right-thinking people, any kind of people who can reason, any kind of people who have any sense of right and wrong could possibly look at that and say, oh, yeah, well, maybe he has a point.
Well, here's my prediction. Unless Stormy Daniels shows up dead in the trunk of President Trump's limousine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even sure that would damage his reelection. Right. But unless something of that level happens, Trump is going to win in 2020. He's going to win bigger than 2016.
It's going to be like Ronald Reagan the second time around, which will really piss him off. And he's going to coattail the Congress back into the Republicans. Hopefully that's true, because here's the deal. He's going to look at the Republicans once he gets them all seated and ready to go again. He's going to look at them and say, look, you guys, you made all these show votes on Obamacare and you didn't do anything. So I'm going to give you something to vote on, and you better vote on it, or in 2 years, we're all going to be out of a job.
Well, let me give you the last little piece.
So says Chuck Woolery.
Oh, the Chuck Woolery bobblehead. And Rusty, I don't know if you know this, but Chuck actually is in the Guinness Book of World Records as having the largest bobblehead.
Is that right? I did not know that.
My head sits on a Toyota Spring.
Now, is there a hat that you could put on his head?
It took the coil spring of it's a Honda Civic.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
And it took the coil spring of a car to hold Chuck Woolery's head up.
Big head, big heavy head up.
Is there a hat you could maybe put on that head by chance?
I don't think there's a hat that exists in the world that I could put on that head.
But for normal people, you can buy a Make America Republic Again hat. But my last thing to you, Chuck, is this. New poll, 50% of Hispanics are now supporting President Trump. That is a game changer.
That is heartburn for Democrats is what that is. That's
a game changer. And do you know what the number one reason they're supporting him is?
The wall, probably.
They
immigration.
want the wall.
Yeah, the illegal immigration. Of course they do. So do I. So does every other reasonably thinking American. What's going on our border is ridiculous. It's a tragedy. It should never be allowed to happen. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching the show today and listening to us on Twitter. Anything to say in passing or in closing?
All I can say is an hour is not enough time to cover the shenanigans that happen every freaking hour of this world right now.
What we have, unfortunately, but that's okay. Thanks, everybody, again for listening. I hope you'll continue to listen to Blunt Force Truth and share it with your friends and neighbors. I'm Chuck Woolery, along with Mark Young, saying see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.